Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the Skymaster F14 aircraft. Stay tuned and we'll continue organizing this amazing airplane. All right guys, last episode we made some amazing progress organizing the front end of this aircraft, but there is still a ton to do. So we're going to continue organizing the front end of the aircraft and continue wiring and tubing and airing and fueling and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure where we're going to continue. Right now I got to wrap my head around what the next step is, but we are still trying to get that tray in back here, the main gear tray, but we still have to get a bunch of stuff organized, airlines organized, things like that before we can install that tray. So that's going to be a huge step in this video, and that's going to be the first goal, is to work towards getting that tray installed. So one of the next steps here as we get ready to install this main tray is we need to extend our airlines that are very short. Now the reason we need to extend them is, number one, to get them to the appropriate output on these valves, right? We've got our air brake, canopy open, close, canopy lock. So we need to be able to get them up to this point. But we also want to be able to get this tray out and have a decent amount of slack floating around underneath the tray. I don't want to have this so tight where we have to cut these lines to get this tray out. So we do need to extend those lines so we can properly feed the airlines to the tray. Now, Skymaster does include these knockoff Robart connectors. Now, I am not a huge fan of the Skymaster ones generally because the click that actually holds them together usually isn't that strong. So I've actually gone through here and just checked them all. Some of them aren't bad. I've had some of these where there's almost zero click and it's just like floating. So these six here are actually reasonable. I've got four in this drawer right here that are not. So I would generally not use the Skymaster ones because they don't work well, but I would feel confident using these six here. But because of space, we're not going to use those ones. I've gone through my little air bin here, and we've got these metal ones that thread together and have an O-ring and everything. So we're actually going to use these to make extensions for that air tray. Now we could just use a connector piece, so something like that guy right there. But the ones that I have right now, these are restrictors. So one end is open, one end is like that. So we may end up using those guys on some of the gear doors to get them to work properly. But I'll explain more about that later. But anyways, these are actually more money than using these connectors here, which are splittable if needed. So that's what we're going to end up using in this aircraft. We want to make sure it's a for sure solid connection. And these are, in my opinion, better than the Skymaster ones. But again, I would use these ones, but we're dealing with space. So essentially we have our air brake lines, which are right there, the green and yellow one that we need to extend. We actually need to tee all of our gear together. So that's the blue and red ones right there. They need to be teed into the blue and red of the nose gear. And then we need to tee our doors together as well too. So here's our rear doors and here's our front doors right there. Now one thing that is kind of interesting with this 14 is there is three main gear doors here, right? Now in this case, if this door opens first, this door interferes. So the front door needs to open first. This door needs to open second. It's essentially a reverse on the way back. So we need this door can't close first because this door needs to close. But when it's closing, if this door happens to close first, it's not a huge deal because it's going to push itself in. But opening, if this door opens first, there's no way for this door to open up. So we're going to need to maybe do some stuff with this just to make sure that our sequencing works well. So first, and then first. So that's interesting. So what does that mean? It basically means that we may need to play around with the putting an air restrictor in that rear door on the opening sequence. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see what we have to do. So again, that's partly why we want to keep good access to those airlines. So one of the interesting things about restrictors like this is they do work in both directions. So what I mean by that is if you put the restrictor on one of these outputs on the air brake as an example, it's going to work both ways, because if you put it in this line here and the air is coming out, it's restricted as it goes through the restrictor, okay? But the way these valves work is you've also got air traveling back the other direction when the other valve, when the other side of the valve pushes air out. So when this valve switches and air comes out this side, the air has to come back through that restrictor, so it actually works in both directions. Okay, so you can see what's happening here with the airlines. So basically you've got the rear airline joining the front airline right there, and then we've got a T coming off. This feeds the rear airline for the rear doors, and there's a restrictor right there. And then this line here coming forward, this one is going to go into the actual air system itself. So that's how our door setup is completed. And I don't know if you could see the laser beam, but the restrictor's right there. This is the line that feeds the rear doors. All right, guys, and it is time for an early tip time in the video. And of course, tip times are brought to you by trusty bent screwdriver. All right, so tip time today is testing your air system. So we've got our gear door air system all completed. Okay, that's all done back there. So with this gear door system completed, we want to pre-test everything and make sure that it actually works properly. So all I do in this situation is I just take my air compressor. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It's just got the open end on it right there. And I just put air to it and check and make sure that the system works. Doesn't need to be like super pressurized or anything. I find it works just fine. So what I'll do is I'll close the doors now using the yellow line, right? And now we're gonna open them, which is kind of the ultimate test. As we've talked about, we need that door, that rear door, to open after the front one, which it does. So don't forget to test those airlines, air systems, make sure they work, and you can do those tests before you plug everything into the sequencer, get everything buried, and then have to dig stuff out and redo it all. So helps save you time overall. So that's your tip time for this episode. All right, guys, so we've got all of our air system ready to go. So we've got our 2 air brake leads, our gear leads, our brake leads, our door leads. Those are all extended now, and they're extended long enough so they'll have no problem going through the hole in the gear tray that I made. And we're fairly organized here. Everything's laying flat, everything's laying nicely. Of course, this is a mess because it's going to be all hidden underneath the tray. So last thing we have to deal with or run is the main line coming from the air tanks and fill line. Now this needs to be teed off to come up through that hole, but it also needs to be teed off to add in the air compressor. So what I'll do here is I'm going to bring it to roughly where the location of the hole is in the tray. I'm going to add a T. There's going to be a line coming up through the tray, and then we'll have the rest of this line coming forward and going into the compressor is the final goal. All right, so I've covered this in the F-18 video, but hey, not everybody watches all the videos. So this is the line that I was just talking about in the last clip. So one of the things you need to do when you're adding one of these compressors in is use an appropriate T. So I like these Robart Ts because they work well with airline tubing, whether it's Skymaster or DreamWorks or any airline tubing, but they also work well for Festo tubing, 3mm Festo tubing, which we need because we need that size to come off the air compressor. So I've covered this previously, but again, let's cover it again. So coming off the compressor, you need a 4mm piece of tubing. Now, it needs to be 4mm, it needs to be metric. You can buy this from K&S tubing supplies. So anyways, this is what's going to come off the compressor. And then we have a one-way valve, which is a 4mm to 4mm. That's going to go right there on the compressor. And then we're going to have a section of high temperature Teflon tubing that's going to come off that. And then we're going to have a 4mm to 3mm adapter, which is going to plug onto the 4mm Teflon tubing. And then we're going to have the 3mm Festo tubing go to that Robart fitting that I just showed you. So that's the layout of the compressor. And in this situation, I found it works great. It's a good setup and very reliable, and this helps deal with any temperatures and stuff like that. So that's how we're going to be setting it up. We're going to obviously cut these things a little bit shorter when we're needed, but this is how things are getting installed. All right, so one thing I completely forgot to mention in the compressor setup was the moisture trap. Now I got all that run, and then I was like, wait a sec, there's something missing. And I was driving, and it popped in my head that we need the moisture trap installed. Now, we want to make this fairly accessible. Reason is there's nowhere for the moisture to go. So there is an arrow here. The moisture needs to flow that direction with airflow. So there's an arrow right there. And so just keep that in mind. I mean, you wouldn't want to bury it underneath there because, you know, every so often you should open this up and dry it out, basically, is the best thing to kind of, or best way to kind of think about that. So we do need to get the moisture trap installed in the system. Now, I feel like we're really close to installing the main board here, but part of the problem is you just got to run through everything and think about all this stuff. So, you know, we want the power cables, as an example, for the turbines installed, run underneath, and then run down this channel right here towards the front. Well, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to do all that before we put that tray in. So I need to cut these guys and extend them. The only kind of other things that I'm thinking about is the data terminal plugs right there and there. Now those come through the hole as well too and go backwards towards the engines, right? So just trying to make sure we get everything in line before we put that tray in, because it's not very forgiving afterwards. All right, guys, so we've got our extensions made for our front wiring, our turbine power wiring, and so that's done. And then we have our GSU plugs completed. Now, one thing with these GSU plugs and the whole turbine setup and everything is we are using a Zykoy telemetry cable, which meshes with the jetty system beautifully. So there it is right there. But one of the things is we want to make sure that we still have access to the turbines using the GSU plugs right here. So what we need to do is we need to make up a Y cable for each of the GSU plugs at the ECUs. So this is going to plug into one side of the Y. Our GSU lead that I just showed you is going to plug to the, like our extension is going to plug into the other side of the Y, and then this cable is going to go into the ECU. Then we'll have access to everything by the transmitter if needed, and then we have also have access to everything by the GSU screen. So that's what we're making up. We're making up 2 Y cables. All right, and so I find with the power box wire, it's pretty easy to make Y cables. When I do this, I will generally use the normal wire, not the maxi wire. So on the normal wire, all of the cables are the same thickness as the white one. So it's a little easier to get all this done, but basically you're just stripping 2 sets together like this and crimping them all together, and it works out beautifully. Also, not too bad to fit into the ends as well too, but it's nice just to have a little poker. And when I put these ends inside there, I'll just give it a little poke. So now we've got these all crimped together, and we'll just pop them in there and see how they fit. Oh, that one went in all the way. So if you're doing this with a maxi wire, you definitely will have to use force to push those in there. But with the normal wire, there we go. So there's the beginning of our Y cable, and then on this side we're going to have our what I call female ends, but those are going to be on this side to accept the GSU plug and also the telemetry plug. All right, so both of our Y cables are set up and installed, and one more step complete. So I think we are actually ready to install this tray now. I'm just going to do a double check of everything and make sure we've got all of our cables, but I think we are ready to go. All right, guys, and we actually got a couple cool packages that I just want to open up on camera and show you guys. First one is from my buddy Al in Eastern Canada, and these plaques up here came from him, and we got a couple new ones that that he sent over. So we've got this guy here, which is super cool. This is my favorite. So I asked him to make that for me, which is beautiful, love it. This guy here. And this one here. So I picked these up from him thinking I might do a giveaway on one of these. So if you guys are interested in one of these plaques, I don't want to sell them. I want to give it away as a prize. So let me know in the comments below if you are interested in doing a giveaway on one of these plaques. Obviously the lighter side of our C1, I got to keep that one. And then we've got those 2 up there too, which I kind of like as well. So one of these 4 we'll probably do a giveaway, but let me know if you guys want a giveaway on that stuff. All right, the other cool box we got yesterday was this jug, or this box from Jersey Modeler. So we know what's in here, so let's pop this thing open. So let's see if we can make this work here. Oh, look at that. And through the magic of video editing, we unboxed it real quick. Okay, so this is the manual crank setup from Jersey Modeler. So super cool. So this is a DLE manual crank. So Jersey Modeler, Dean at Jersey Modeler made these up and kind of was just asking for some opinions if people would be interested in this. So again, if you guys could throw some comments down below and just let us know if this type of thing has any interest to you. These are listed on the Jersey Modeler website. They will be added to my website very soon. But apparently from the feedback that he's gotten already in the tests, this pump moves a lot of material. So obviously you're getting rid of the power setup. So that's one of the downsides, I guess. But you know, you've got something that always works whether you have battery or not. Now these pumps, I think, these DLE things are quite expensive. And there's a shot of the inside there. So there's a double pickup on the inside. So That's what most of the jugs use. But yeah, just a great setup, flow fast jug. And I think it's going to be a pretty cool setup. So we got this one just to try it out. We'll see if we're going to keep it. We might sell it. But anyways, I'm going to play around with this thing, and it's kind of nice to see these things in person and also obviously get you guys' feedback and opinions on it. So 2 things. Comment down below if you guys would be interested in a giveaway on those plaques. We'll do one of them probably. And the other thing is comment down below whether there is any interest in this manual fuel system with the DLE pump, because it's just nice to get some feedback on what you guys think. All right, so now we got to get this in this and get all the stuff fed through. So essentially what I'm going to do here is put the tray up here, feed all these airlines through first. That's why I left these airlines long enough. And then basically we've got really the GSU plugs right here, which need to be fed through. And what I'm also going to do is our telemetry units are going to sit underneath that tray as well too. There's a really long cable that feeds into the central box, the jetty central box. So there's lots of room there. So these need to come up through the through fitting as well, right here. So I'm going to kind of work on that. Not really exciting filming stuff, but I'm going to work on that, and we're going to get that installed. Well, she is installed, and boy, what a mess, hey? It's not going to be a mess forever, but that is what we got going on. So lots and lots of equipment in there, which is pretty crazy. So probably the tightest thing to get set up is going to be the lines going to the UATs, but it's all pretty tight. So I'm going to do this kind of in a pattern here, and the pattern is going to be working from the back forward. So I want to get the turbine stuff installed, the lines and everything, just because our access is a little bit limited once we get those UATs installed, but we need to do the UATs kind of next or first, and then kind of work our way forward on all the other stuff, the airlines and all that kind of stuff. So lots going on. All right, so we've got the turbine stuff plugged in. And before I put the UATs on the UAT holders, I'm going to deal with all the airlines next. So the airlines are pretty straightforward. We're going to plug everything in except the canopy lock and canopy open, which are right here. Those, of course, come to the front, those little air cylinders right there, and then the actual canopy air cylinders right there, so that's nice and short too. So, but all of these airlines are for the gear, the doors, the air brake, and that all gets plugged into its appropriate areas. So that's the next thing we're going to get all plugged in. All right, little by little, we are making some progress here. So we've got all of our airlines run, we've got the air brake airlines run, and we are all neat and tidy. Next thing, UATs. Okay, so here's one of the UATs set up. So we've got the line installed. This is the line that goes to the tank pickup on the main tanks. So of course we're using 8mm high flow Festo line, and we're going to keep this nice and simple. So this is the line that goes to the tanks, this is our fill line, and this is our fuel pump pickup. All right, UATs are installed. Those UAT holders that are available on my website, they do come with tie straps, zip ties, the nice heavy duty black ones, which are great. So those are both installed and plumbed into the main tank. All right, and next step done, this is our fill line, right? So we've got our one fill line coming from the back, that Y's off onto each of the UATs. All of this stuff is the same length. Not that it really matters on the fill line, but it's nice and clean. So that is done. Now, next thing to do with this tray is to get the fuel pumps mounted. Now we're going to mount those fuel pumps right here, and there's going to be a nice short connection to the intakes on the UAT. So it's going to be very, very short section of tubing, and it's going to go right to there. All right, so we've got the water trap all plumbed in. So the check valve is right down there. The Teflon tubing comes up and loops around into the water trap, comes out, and then there's a 4 to 3 reducer right there. And then the airline, the green airline, you can see a little snippet of it right there. That goes back into the system. So initially, I actually brought this from the check valve up into the water trap. The reason I eliminated that is because it was pushing down on this metal tubing, so it was actually causing quite a bit of side force on those Festo fittings, and that could cause a potential leak. So that's why we've got this little loop right here to minimize the amount of force, side force on those fittings. So that stuff is done. Initially I was going to put the fuel pumps right here, but actually a way better spot is right there. So what we can do now is have a nice little loop that goes into the pump, and the feed lines going to the turbine, these little 4 mil guys, they can come right down, do a nice little loop into the fuel pump, and it's nice and clean, keeps everything out of the way and back to the sides, so we've got good access to this area. So the only tricky thing right now is going to be plugging in our air controller down here. So all of our plugins for the regular inputs are on the side or the bottom of it right there. And so we don't have great visibility right there. So that's going to be probably our only challenge. We'll see what we're going to do about that, but we're coming together. All right, so we're just prepping the fuel pumps here, and the MAP UATs, high flow ones, they come with this reducer. So the point of the reducer is to go from 8mm Festo tubing to 6mm tubing. So basically you run 8mm from the UAT directly to the fuel pump, then you step down just at the fuel pump here to the 6mm input. So that's what we've done there. We have added safety wire to the fittings. I generally don't add safety wire to the barb fittings anymore, but the reason I did it on this one is because we got a pretty tight loop that's going to be coming off this to go to the UAT, so there's going to be a fair bit of side force on that tube, so we want to make sure it stays in place and never pops off. So we've got both of the fuel pumps prepped. Now we can work on getting them installed. So I have put the zip tie in there, tie strap in there, and next thing to do is get the 4mm line installed on here, then get the 8mm line installed on the UAT to the fuel pump. Last step is going to be zip tying it in place. You need this to be fairly free to be able to put all those tubes and stuff on, so that's why I'm not tying it down yet. All right, so all of the fuel system is plumbed. Nice and neat and clean and traceable and all even. I think it turned out really, really nice. So as a final step here, what I do is I'm going to take a little bit of shoe goop, put it on the pumps themselves, like around the zip tie and the mount, just a little bit to keep those fuel pumps from moving, because it's just the one tie strap that's holding it in place. Okay, now that we've got the plumbing all finished, now it's time to go through and safety wire the fittings that need safety wiring. Now I don't do all of my fittings. So as an example, this Y fitting right here, this comes from a Powerbox smoke pump. There is one primary barb, 3 secondary barbs. This is an absolutely amazing tight fit on this thing. When I run my hands over it, I can feel every single barb. So this fitting absolutely doesn't need safety wire. But the UAT fittings here, where I put the 8mm on the pickup side, that was a pretty easy push on. So probably fine without it, but we're going to add safety wire there. We've talked about it already. We put it on the pump side. So I'm a little selective on where I put the safety wire. The 6mm fitting on the fuel fitting, or the fueling fitting, that was a really tight fit as well too, so I'm not going to add safety wire on those ones. So hopefully that gives you some insight on why I do what I do. All right, and we've made some pretty awesome progress in this video. I think the last thing we're going to do is mount the Cortex gyro. Now, this gyro can be mounted in any direction, any orientation, I should say. The stock orientation is like this with the servo outputs facing forward. So initially I was thinking about mounting it here, possibly somewhere on that back tray, but of course that got full real quick. So the problem with putting it here is the cockpit sits really close. So there's enough room for the Central Box 400, the leads coming out and all that stuff, but if you put the Cortex on top like this and have that cockpit sitting there, it's sitting basically right where my finger is, kind of like that. So there's just no room, and we don't want that cockpit touching the gyro and hitting the gyro. So because we've changed the location of the fuel pumps, this actually probably makes the most amount of sense to put it right there. Now what I have to do is glue down a nice smooth piece of material that we can use the double-sided tape to. We can't just stick it to that open hole, that would be no good. And I want to put it here because we still possibly need something to come out of this hole, out of this hole. If we go like this, then that eliminates that option. So that is where we're going to mount that Cortex. That's going to be awesome. So anyways, that's where we're putting it. I'm just going to sort out what we're going to do with the thing that's going to stick to, maybe a piece of carbon or something like that, and we'll glue that piece down. All right, and the Cortex is mounted. So I have this piece of carbon ply. I believe it's from the CARF kits. Anyway, so I stuck the Cortex with the appropriate double-sided tape onto that. And then of course we screwed it down, and it is nice and fastened and awesome. All right guys, and I think that was a pretty successful video dealing with the mess. Now, I did think that we would get all of the organizing and everything done in this video. Obviously we didn't, because there was a lot to do. Every time I went to go put that tray in, basically I thought, oh yeah, we need to run this thing. Oh yeah, we need to run this thing and this thing and this thing. So just kept adding up and more and more and more. But we did make some good progress in this video, and I think it was awesome. So just want to give a quick shout out to everybody that has donated to the Shop Build Fund. Thank you so much for those donations. It is very appreciated. And Nez the cat's on the ground right now saying thank you as well too. So thank you guys for those donations. It is awesome. All right, so it's going to take 3 videos to get this plane organized, but we are kind of in the home stretch as well too. So in the next video, what we're doing is we are going to start with the wiring. So taking all of that massive power box wires, cutting them to a nice length and running them into the jetty box in an organized, clean fashion. Now we got some exciting news. David, the owner of the aircraft, is flying up here to spend a day and a bit, and we're going to have some fun with the aircraft. So what that means is we're going to start the next video with some organizing on the aircraft, and then we are going to be doing engine runs and stuff like that in the next video as well too, while David's here. So that's the plan. David, I know you're watching this, so looking forward to having you here in the shop. I'm excited, and it's going to be a fun time. So anyways, lots to do in the next video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Thank you for watching the channel, for supporting the channel. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you are not a subscriber to the channel. And if you are, well, thank you. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Look how dirty you are. You're rolling around on the ground. Nez. She's like a baby. She's got glue all over her ear. She's covered in dust. Yes, Nez. Come on. Yes.